Hello, my name is Carla Leitao and I'm an architect. I'm currently teaching. Oh, can you hear me better? Sorry. Currently teaching in Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York, and also at Pratt Institute, the graduate architecture school in Brooklyn, in the Brooklyn campus. My talk is called Foundation Landscapes of Massive Oblivion. So I've been working on a series of architecture studios called and dedicated to the theme of planetology. One of the themes asks about the potential of architectural thought applied to landscapes of massive oblivion. These are places devoted to archiving excess, obsolete, or toxic substances or objects. Different types of entities that want to be hidden away for short to long periods of time, and this includes landfills, storage of radioactive materials, nuclear test areas, and places of recovery from some kind of recent disaster, among others. A kind of library problem of its own, the massive oblivion tries to understand how to create typologies or constructions that reinterpret, represent, and create readability of that which is usually made to remain invisible, untouchable, or unreachable. One obvious example of site is the discussion around the Yucca Mountain, Nevada, as a potential future nuclear waste storage facility. The abandonment of this site, or temporary, for that of the WIPP, Waste Isolation Pilot Plant in New Mexico, involved the short frame of politics, but also the very long frame of geological structures that could withstand tens of thousands and then 1 million years of slow decay of radioactive materials. And these studios, by the way, we counted on some collaborations to work with these landscapes. One was with Dr. Abraham Van Leeuwenhoek and his team at TWIP, and then as well with Center for Infrastructure, Transportation and Environment, which is a research center at RPI. And we worked in the CRAVE lab, which is a 360-degree, you only see 270 here, sorry, but 360-degree immersion visualization lab, a plug-in facility, which is hosted by the Center for Communication, Cognition, and Culture at RPI, but has a very straight collaboration now with architecture that has been started with the studios and some seminars. So in this collaboration and engaging this the CRAVE lab, which is this collaborative immersive space, the landscapes of varying degrees of radioactive risk involved less programmed or even seemingly abandoned remote sites such as the Cactus Dome, a place where nuclear test materials are encased in a cracking concrete dome. The project involved measuring the cracking process, amplifying its urgency into public space. As well, what we call waste is also archived unevenly distributed across the world in tests and real catastrophic events. The polygon in Kazakhstan and Hiroshima in Japan can be said to share a history of influence, the events in their spaces having erased previous cultures and inserted a new timeline of decay in the landscape. In the polygon site, a nomad culture can no longer be observed without technologically enabled forced representation. In the Hiroshima site, fragments of the past flicker mute across the contemporary landscape. These landscapes are divided and reconnected through a shared wedge which implants a new timeline, forever making them site and archive. All this matter withstanding, and where is the measure of the human body? Where is the blood? An estimate that we've done in the CRAVE lab was to fill virtually the CRAVE lab with blood. And the measure we found was, for instance, that it related perfectly with the blood needed in the first 1 hour after an attack in New York City for the perimeter of New York City to care for the injured, if that would have been possible, which wouldn't have been as well. So what you see, the numbers you see on the top is the kinds of facilities that would be affected in the immediate perimeter and then in the surrounding area. As well, in this in this studio, we work with other Oblivion landscapes, those of entire cultures who become submerged by water and displacement. The Maldives are not expected to survive as a nation in the next 50 years. What is now the nation's body will become a part of another dimension of remembrance. How much of what stays behind continues to be part of a narrative of inhabitation? How much continues to be part of a narrative of culture or tourism or other kinds of remembrance and reflection? So here, for instance, we looked at different cultures of coming back that would be semi-touristic, by people who would be displaced for other places in Asia across the next few decades, basically. And what could they revive or communicate with? in terms of this kind of new touristic operations, or again, semi-touristic, 7 stars, as they call it. Also looking at things like the timelines of the disappearing of bodies of water. How much, sorry? That's it. Sorry. The water is a connector and the remediation project of a port. Can I have 1 more minute to wrap up? Okay. Okay. In a port in Tianjin, which has effects on port protocols across the global maritime transportation infrastructure. And of course, we looked at a lot of materials and materials interaction and how they sort and manage information as well, especially across these very large timelines. And thinking of these intelligent ways in which architectures try to use materials to manage these operations, this kind of invisible, domesticate this kind of invisible risk. And how we've worked with other macro situations, so like waste transfer stations, which are ultimately sorting mechanisms that are not material but informational as well. Not only material but informational. And of course, close to home, abandoned rail yards. So close by docksy landscapes are often just a station away. Abandoned rail yards and their equipment are strewn over surrounding ecosystems, fenced lightly, not keeping out curious minds. And there are places of strong intermingling, inseparable chemical substances, which seep deep into soils only to reappear as timelines of consequence. The invisibility separates and interrupts neighborhoods and communities, often, ecosystems and waterways, and remediation technologies must right now involve social and cultural remediation techniques as well that can bridge across those gaps. And so, you know, the studio also asked what kinds of sensors and weaving tools can we deploy to reveal these. So I think these landscapes are all as well a certain new kind of library, and these constructions questions propose a way in which architecture as a cultural agents can think and involve what are usually hidden landscapes into mental perceptive maps of populations. And they attribute librarian roles to species, so new ecological like biotech species and matter as well. And they imbue themselves with the larger goal of creating new levels of awareness, intelligence, and operability regarding the existence of landscapes. So these crusts we easily dismiss and which are foundational or directly connected to our lives, especially now in the Anthropocene, and to culture and permanence. And so put simply, these landscapes and their potential projects or cultural constructions, they bring back a hidden but underlying space that form our most visible configurations, nations, regions, and cities, into public discourse and spatial representation, providing ways to bridge across ecosystems, cultures, and time. Thank you.
I don't do the pad. I can only mouse. Can I? Yeah, thank you. You can start it for me. Yeah, just go ahead. You just start the show. Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I always tell my audience, trying to put them at ease, don't worry about my shaking. I've got Parkinson's disease. I confess I'm Twitter-pated. Run pell-mell with this rant. Why mince my words or eat them? When turn back time I can't. I waste precious seconds to prove this brevity absurd. Though the exit door beckons, I'll stay and tweet it like a bird. Newfangled fads all twittery, unnerve we babies of the boom. Make us bobble-headed jittery, we'll lose it, leave the room. Fragmented speech, throttle speaker, proof of point can't be reached if truth can't find its seeker. Hear that fast approaching thunder? I am hit with bolt out of the blue. Personality split asunder. Epiphanic, egomanic, this gig I can do. Exit Wendy, enter Eureka, Sarah, Sooth, and of Truth Seeker, lightning talker, grand dame of Anthropocenic poetry slam. My Parkinson's disease is a strange paradox, both blessing and curse, makes me think outside the box. Medicated, much enthused, drug reaction the reason for return of my muse. I'm her steno, amanuensis, agnostic true believer, premonition receiver, logophilic culture critic, evil genius, creative warrior, devil may not care but I do. Can divinity be divorced from my inspiration source? Just know I'm doubly troubled, part Cassandra, part Colbert. A warning and disclaimer before your attention I lose. This presentation reflective only of my own views. I speak not for my employer. At podium I stand alone. Caution, keep back 100 feet. I cannot be held liable for institutional odium induced by my words, replete with power, packing so much clout. If they got out, they'd grab you by the lapels. Maybe reach you, teach you. A movement start. If you begin to doubt my sanity, blame it on the muse or meds, not me. And most emphatically, the point is, don't finger UNC. And is it stopped? I'm sorry.
I don't know.
Something stopped. Yeah, because I need the music to. Okay. Okay, so the time is going to be a little bit off. This was the song for the previous one. So. Okay. Okay, I'll stop at this point. Float like a butterfly, sting like you can. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. The hands can't hit what the eyes can't see. I'm 57 and still can't discern when to be the butterfly, when to be the bee. Is it better, more right to stay, stand up and fight, or wiser situationally to turn tail, flee, far, far away from the fray, refuse to give away my precious energy? Consult pinball wizard, consult pinball wizard, find Madeline's manual in stacks, check out Langle's wrinkle, renew it just in time, locate working TARDIS, wet fingertip test wind, don helmet and life vest, swallow fear, set dials to day, month, year, energize, accelerate, brake, tailgate by Tesseract, bend time, tilt, Luddites throw switch and Whovian plot twist, so I have to hitch, hail hyperloop, Tesla's contraption, top gear, pneumatic tubes, solid state steampunk, pile of junk, nanoparticulates leak, wires frayed, fan belt loose, fuel gauge empty, runs on thin air. It's a miracle I've made it here. Safe at home, I should have stayed. Queued, fell in line, joined team, ran relay race, existential environmental crisis to somehow outpace. We each took baton. Our turn, fossil fuels to spurn. Advocate alternatives, pass it on, insist upon, create, nurture, hope for the future. We keep on keeping on till we pass on. Drinking chi, averted crisis, developed daily practice, lifted spirit to sky, arms arcing like goddess. Trust in universal energy, available on demand, honored intuition, integrity of my life, I took command. Chill out, chicks, you fret too much. You know I've got the Midas touch. Just kicking the can down the road, digging for coal and dumping slurry. What me worry? I've got no bridge to cross. Muckraking media's fake. I'm worry-free, carefree, and ready to take. All the profits, invest them in my real estate. Favors curried. Ha! What me worry? Good morning, deniers. I'm your Auntie Wendy, and I welcome you to my sustainable camp. My camp's about the climate. Always mind the weather. When you come to Wendy's, you'll empathize with others. We order chaos, catalog pain. We become the change we want to see. We take our bodies back. We stand up to the bullies. Throw the book at them. Give them something to worry about. Hands off our vaginas. Not in our backyards. Keep it in the ground and keep it in your pants. We read aloud to the babies, re-educate the educable. We take up space, spread full wingspan. We throw our arms around the world. Colleagues, I'm giving you a loving look because every day, you write the book.
Hello, everyone. I have 5 minutes before I talk. This talk, it's CC BY, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 license. Minute 5, introduction. I'm William Denton. I'm a librarian at York University in Toronto, Canada, and I'm going to be talking about GHG.EARTH. GHG is for greenhouse gases, and Earth is for Earth. This is a website, but do not look at it right now, but get ready to look at it, everyone with all your MacBooks. Open up a tab in a browser in Chrome or Firefox and type in GHG.EARTH, but do not go there yet. Wait till minute 4. Some background. I've been working on sonifications, turning data into sound. Climate change research produces a lot of data, especially time series, and it's interesting and useful to turn that into sound or music. Sonifying atmospheric carbon dioxide, you hear the yearly fluctuations of the northern hemisphere takes in carbon in the summer and then releases it in the winter. And you hear the rise year over year of the greenhouse gases that we're adding to the atmosphere. Sonifying a long time series of climate change data makes very clear the sudden changes that we've caused since industrialization. GHG.EARTH, however, just does one thing. It plays yesterday. It turns yesterday's CO2 measurements into sound. Minute 4. Now we're going to perform it. So get ready. When I say enter, when I say now, hit enter, you're going to see a number and you'll hear a sound. At the end of the minute, I'll count down to 5, and then everybody close the tab. So if everybody's ready, then now. I hope people heard that. I couldn't make it out up here. Minute 3, the number. This number is yesterday's CO2 rating in parts per million, taken at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Observatory in Mauna Loa, Hawaii, where the famous Keeling curve comes from. A script scrapes the data every day from its website, and if you follow the details link on there, then there's links to all the code and the data. The usual estimate is that before the Industrial Revolution, CO2 is at 280 ppm. We're over 400 now, around 410, and it won't go back under in our lifetimes. IPCC models make predictions about how much CO2 will be in the air depending on different actions that we take. In the best case scenario, emissions peak very soon and then decline, and by about 2070 we're taking carbon out of the atmosphere. In that case, in 2100 we'll be at about 420 ppm. Worst case scenario, by 2100 we're at 936 ppm, which would be an unprecedented global catastrophe. So far we've always been beyond the worst case scenario. Minute 2, the sound. This is a composition. The score is play the tone in hertz equal to the atmospheric CO2 concentration in parts per million. There's no end specified. There's no arrangement or instrument specified. Anyone can play this for as long as they want, wherever they want, whenever they want, just like we did. Now, a piano has just over 7 octaves, with pitches going from 27.5 hertz down low to almost 4200 hertz up high. All current and historical CO2 readings map to a pitch that's somewhere in that range. 440 ppm, for example, would be a concert pitch, that A, the sound you hear when an orchestra is tuning up. 280, pre-industrial number, maps to a C sharp, the black key just above middle C in the fourth octave on a piano. 410, where we are now, is a little higher. It's just below G sharp. 420, best case, is just over G sharp. And that 936 is an octave up into the fifth octave at A sharp. It's hard to hear the day-to-day changes in GHG.EARTH because it's microtonal. I've never been able to remember yesterday well enough to distinguish it from today, but I keep trying. Minute 1 octave to live in. Doubling the frequency makes a pitch go up by 1 octave. 440 is A in the fourth octave, and 880 is A in the fifth octave. The musical scale is a geometric progression. It's exponential. An arithmetic progression is linear. It changes by the same amount every time. An annual CO2 concentration is almost arithmetic. We're going up by about 2 or 3 every year. Close enough. The two numbers, the musical and the atmospheric, are literally working on different scales. So this means we only have 1 octave to live in. That fourth octave there on the piano, from middle C up to B, that's where we have to stay. Pre-industrial, we were at C sharp. Now we're getting close to G sharp. And all of human existence has been in just a few keys above middle C. And we need to stay there, and we definitely don't want to go into the next octave that starts at 525. But that's long term. GHG.EARTH is there to tell us what CO2 concentration sounds like right now. So you can play it in the background quietly, and after a while it'll fade out of your attention. You'll start thinking about other things, and then it'll come back sharply. You'll remember what it means, and you'll remember the situation we're in now. Thank you.
Hello. Okay, this is going to be a very low-tech presentation. I don't have any slides or anything like that, so. Okay. Oh, sorry. All right. Librarians in the former Soviet Union are attempting to improve public awareness of ecological degradation and climate change by elevating relevant collections and incorporating them into environmental literacy instruction. As evidenced by multiple iterations of the Codex of Librarians' ethics, Russian librarians, in particular, have endeavored to redefine their professional role as one of information provider and not the information gatekeepers of the Soviet era. In order to elevate collections and instruct users, librarians must be able to access information that is relevant to their constituencies. For instance, they need to be able to access area-specific media in the local language. Librarians in the former Soviet Union face information access challenges like this on a daily basis. This problem in some ways reflects the same issues of the digital divide the world over. That is the rural-urban connectivity disparity as well as the rich-poor divide. However, I would like to argue that the lack of a robust union catalog hinders climate change communication and understanding because of the nature of climate change information. It is complex and spans classification, but more on that later. First, a little history. During Soviet times, the confluence of factors precluded the development of a union catalog. This presaged an inability to build a truly integrated library system, an unfortunate legacy of the former Soviet states today. One factor is that the totalitarian rule of the USSR countenanced library purges. Purged books weren't destroyed, rather many of them went into special storage, secret storage, and could only be accessed by elites. Indeed, it was an open secret in the Soviet era that every library had 2 catalogs, one for regular people and another more robust catalog for use of elites only. Another facet of Soviet librarianship that slowed integration was the project of creating new ideology-based classification systems, more reflective of the glory of the Soviet Union. The Soviet classification system was not finalized until the 1970s, so it was not until then that Soviet librarians even explored the possibility of publishing a paper-based union catalog. In contrast, in Western librarianship in the 1970s, automated library systems were being implemented with an eye towards networking catalogs. Automation of library services in all of the former Soviet states lags behind, in some places by decades. In Russia, only about 10% of approximately 113,000 libraries use an electronic catalog. And many of those catalogs are homegrown and require a lot of retro conversion before they can network with another library, which of course is a prerequisite of an electronic union catalog. Only 60% of public libraries in Russia can access the internet, although many of those libraries only have dial-up connection. Broadband access is still very rare. In public libraries, such access is generally found only in the large regional libraries in the most populated city. Okay. Permeation of broad-based internet information and communication technologies is low, and that is a problem. But my hang-up takes me a step further to worry over a union catalog for Russia. Why? Well, the nature of environmental information is complex. It is informed by science, which is itself an ever-growing body of knowledge that simultaneously grows and deepens. Often, social, political, and economic themes frame the literature, and other disciplinary topics, including but not limited to health and agriculture, further compound its complexity. Moreover, research into climate change issues may involve a vocabulary to which regular people are unaccustomed. In my view, the complexity of environmental information necessitates, at the very least, an electronic library catalog. And here let us remember that the value of a library is not only that it freely offers, a public library is that it freely offers media and programming for citizens to avail themselves, but also that it provides curated, mediated, organized collections with various access points. The benefit of this organization cannot be understated. When collections are presented in an electronic catalog, one has the ability to search in many combinations via multiple access points for known items or offered items through a subject search. It is important to point out that these types of searches go well beyond just the keyword inputs of a web search engine. Unfortunately, in many small Russian libraries, an electronic catalog may not yield much appropriate information. Book stocks in libraries were depleted through decades of purges. After the fall of the Soviet Union, overtly ideological items that were never popular in the first place were weeded out, and poverty-level conditions of the 90s and 2000s made purchases to repopulate the stacks only a dream. But in conjunction with other Russian libraries, especially the select few that are very well resourced and are busily creating their own content online, the small libraries of Russia suddenly have access to a great many sources. In addition to being able to access relevant information through an electronic catalog, the instant recall of the results is beneficial itself in that it reveals the contours and concerns of the object of search. In other words, the preponderance of instantly visible search results from an electronic union catalog is in itself informative. In large part, this is because items that are part of any library catalog have been vetted and processed, at least to minimal standards. So, by virtue of the fact that a certain medium appears in a library catalog, means that the item is legitimate. Indeed, even when an item is not factually correct or published as a hoax, it gains legitimacy as a source because such characteristics are reflected in its classification and subject headings. It is in this way that librarians may benefit from other librarians' previous work. They can also see what other librarians have acquired and for their own collections. Via union catalogs, previously opaque and hidden collections become transparent and thus comparable for collection development. Here's the good news. There's a specifically Russian electronic union catalog born out of a consortium of regional library associations. This catalog is available to any library in the former Soviet states, and its focus is on research sharing, although it also facilitates copy cataloging. The bad news is that only about 1,700 of, again, Russia's 113,000 libraries contributes to it. So librarians teaching environmental literacy everywhere have to repackage information in such a way as to meet users where they are. Environmental literacy is not just about educating people with an interest in climate change. It's about providing the right info at the right time in the right way. The more libraries that are networked to union catalogs, the better the chance of that happening. Thank you.
Wait, why is this not minimizing? I'm on a Mac. Hold on 1 second. Don't I just how do you open? Why does it not double click? Did it open?
Can someone help me? It's spinning. It's not doing anything. Okay. We'll do the PDF. Okay, that's why I sent both. Just in case. All right, my name's Beth, and I am about a little over 2 years ago, I moved to Oregon, and I moved into a department head role. So my talk today is going to be a little bit about how I can be there for my people. It's more about people than collections, and how I can help with the issues of change management, changing baby steps, kind of like John talked about yesterday a little, changing habits, which is hard. So I'm at Oregon State University. We are, the Valley Library, in this picture here, is the only library on campus. We have 3,000 gate counts a day. We're open 24 hours, 5 days a week. So we have, and I'm in charge of the public service desks and the building, so all that falls under me. And so we have a lot of activity. We're really busy. We have a lot of trash, but that also means we have a lot of chance to influence. So my first question, because I've worked at a lot of different libraries, is thinking about the culture, and does a culture where you are support like sustainability practices? I mean, and if not, I'd say like trying to get together with like-minded people to kind of, like we are in this room today, to kind of like support each other. And as a manager, how can I advocate for those people and moving things forward? But another thing I'd say is asking your users, students, whoever, what their needs are, and if you can get some information from what they want, then that's another reason to bring to administration to kind of help make some change happen. Now for me, I'm really lucky, because now that I'm in Oregon, we have a strategic plan that we follow, and our core values are key, and I have sustainability as part of our core values. So right there, I can now, as a manager, make change to policies, change work habits, change things like that, and influence the building and the public services and things that we do in our library. So one example is, here's a quote from one of our position descriptions. So I now can write in position descriptions for people, as an example of somebody in circulation, and I can put this in here, and not only is it helping me to help them, I can evaluate them on things that are in their position, and we can start making some change. It's just one way that I can hold them accountable, and help them, those that want to make some changes in a positive direction. And I was going to talk a little bit about external and internal, and what I mean by external is our users in our space in the library, and internal is the staff areas and what we're doing internally with our habits and work practices. So since we run all the public service areas and the whole building, I need buy-in from my staff as well in order to do anything changes we want to do externally. Here's an example of our university librarian outside of, one of our recycle bins outside the library, and it's actually on all of our computer screens too when the students use the computers in the library, and they're like, oh, you're the lady that's recycling on the computer. So to have something like that is really nice, because we have this role model of a leader, and what is she doing, and that can kind of help start influencing things. So real quick, I'm going to give some examples of external and internal things that we're doing. So external, one thing I love about the library, and I do user experience, is kind of my library experience and access department is the name of my department. And we are all about what do the students want. And so I love working as the library as a living laboratory for doing different things, and having the students do things in the library. So I'd say that because I think that's a great way on a college campus to have these opportunities to make changes and get input from your users. So a design thinking course where they're learning the design thinking process. They've been working with us for several terms now, and they're redesigning sustainability services in the library. So I'm getting direct information from my users. Doing things such as supporting an intern to work with one of my direct reports who's creating things like this educational poster. We have a robust composting system in Corvallis, Oregon. So we collected, during exam time, we collect 72 pizza boxes that we can compost during that, that they're eating in the library. And we're working on composting stations in the public. Some issues there, but we're starting it. So internally, supporting my staff to go to sustainability conferences. I even let one of them go to this master's recycling program in town on work hours, but they bring it back and they're like training the rest of us and teaching the rest of us on what we can do. And we have a lot of discussions on cleaning, because my students are cleaning the public service areas. So what we're doing a lot of is just bringing in old rags. You can see the dirty rags, and the students clean, they throw them in and re-wash them later. So just trying to think about little habits that we can do to make some changes. We recently got a party pack where it's made of recycled plastics, and any department in the library can use it for parties. And then it might seem weird to mention a fridge, but like I want my 24 hours, 2 a.m. in the morning staff and students to eat real food. So having a regular fridge where they can bring in food and eat it is really important. And you can see we can promote things like taking care of yourself and going on nature hikes on the fridge. And I know it sounds silly to some of you maybe to create a committee, but this committee was created in my department, so I now am in leadership role. I can advocate for them. And a lot of the last slide I have up here, a lot of what they said about having a committee, and I said, is this really important? Is it making a difference? And they said, yeah, because now I feel like administration cares. And now we can actually say, yes, we're gonna make changes to policy. And I can take my core values in my workplace and teach that to other students as well. So that's some of the feedback they gave me. And there's my contact information if you have more questions. Thank you.
Looks like it opened or just made noise. Let's close down PowerPoint. Okay. You're awesome. All right. Okay. Oh, that. Is that from the music from before? There we go. Okay, so I made the mistake of making 35 slides. I'm going to race through them. So, permaculture ethics kind of informs my my way of being on the planet and the way I would like to approach life and how I would like the library to do it. Earth care, people care, fair share. Ways that the library can support this: programming, displays, services, blogging, networking. Earth care, I'm going to focus on that. This is a little bit more decentralized. A lot of it is things that I've done at the library. Right now I'm doing a regenerative living series. We're trying to do one each month, and it's about basically skilling people, kind of piggybacking on what Jody's presentation this morning. So we did Plan Your Garden, we did a seed swap, which was actually wonderful, harvesting rainwater, and growing fruit trees. My friend and permaculture design person, Sharona Thompson, has taught like 3 of those, and she's very enthusiastic, and people like her programs, and I consider her my guru. I put together displays to go with the program to both advertise the program as well as advertise our collection. We've also had programs on tiny homes, what's weird with the weather from an NCAR researcher, and we had a panel discussion, Earth Care, People Care, Fair Share. Unfortunately, we did that on a Monday night, and people don't really come out to programs on Monday night, so I learned something from that. Internally, one of my colleagues has set up a little thing for staff where encouraging us to use the stairs instead of the elevator. And so for each floor you do, you've got a number of feet, and you climb a 14er, and we have about 60 plus, 14,000 plus mountains in Colorado. This is a display I did a few years ago working with folks in the Grow Local Food movement in Denver, Grow Food, Grow Community. One of the people who lent me his artwork was Kenny B. He's a graphic artist, cartoonist in Denver, and he has done, and I don't know if you can really see it, but those seed packets, each seed packet is a different neighborhood in the city, and he incorporates vegetables with some element of that neighborhood, and they're awesome. I started out a few years back with right around the Transition Towns movement, going local, creating a clean, green, and inclusive economy, trying to seed ideas with the population. And this is a display in the main hallway of the Denver Public Library, the Central Branch. I also had done one on bicycles. I didn't have a slide of it, but this is one of my favorite images that I put in there. What do you want, this or that? Here are some folks that we've been working with. The Denver Permaculture Guild. They had a confluence recently called Life on the Edge, A Changing Climate, A Changing City. They had a panel discussion that was awesome called The Edge and the Intersection. The topic of gentrification came up, which is a really, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of ways that we can put sustainability with gentrification together. We also worked with the Office of Sustainability. Denver has 2020 sustainability goals. We have an annual summit now. We've done it for 3 years in a row. We also did a unified messaging across a number of cultural organizations in Denver called Love This Place. There's 3 members of the Office of Sustainability, and that's our Mayor Hancock on the right. What the library did in conjunction with that was to do a display in the main hallway on Sustainable Denver. Another partner on and off has been Aleph, the Americas Latino Eco Festival, which happens in the fall. It's been going on for 4 years now. It is amazing if you can get yourself over there. It's a celebration of Latino culture and the arts, music, and also ecological, environmental issues. There's movies. The people who come to that are amazing. This is one of the artists from Cuba, Falco. He's got look him up online. He's got a lot of neat art. They also have, they put together a Colorado Rewild book fair, which has awesome books in it. And then the highlight for me on the last one was we had a lot of indigenous leaders, and that's Maxima Acuña, the short woman in the middle, who just won a suit against Newmont Mining in Peru. And we did a prayer out on the green in the middle of Denver, right in the Civic Center Park during rush hour, and prayer for the earth in the midst of traffic. It was really pretty profound. So people care. Now this is more, there's a lot of concerted effort within the library, a lot of different committees and task forces. One of the things we're doing is a lot of adult programming called Engage, and that's really flourishing in the last year. We also have a phenomenal Homeless Services Action Committee that was instrumental in us hiring 2 community resource specialists, social workers that actually meet up with people. They hired peer navigators recently. We have a Hard Times writing workshop once a week that is led by the Lighthouse Writers, and it is well attended, and there is a crew that just keeps coming back, and they're very supportive of each other. They also do a Hard Times meditation workshop on Friday afternoons, and our security staff has been well trained and really can intervene in a very caring way. That didn't come out so well. Oh well. RADA is a social issues book club that I'm a part of. Read, Awareness, Dialogue, Action. This was our very first inaugural book talk using Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. Really good discussion. A local strategic illustrator named Chris Whitman, pro bono, came in and documented the conversation in this art, and has given us that big, huge poster, which is about as big as this, and we're thinking about trying to get it digitized. But it's a really amazing way of documenting a profound conversation amongst the community. We did one recently on All-American Boys. A colleague and I, I work on the first floor most of the time, we've done Michelle Norris's The Race Card Project, and here people take their feelings about race and they distill it down to 6 words and then post it up, and then people walk around and look at each other's things. So it's another way of having a community conversation. Here's some things that people have wrote. We are all one, teach love. We appreciate diversity in flowers. Why not in people too? I can't do racism. And she's like, you can see, black, white, Native American, Jewish, me. Respect, accept, celebrate, enrich all peoples. Not everything was so positive, but most of it was, which made me feel better. Additional people care endeavors from the library. We've got an amazing team of plaza and services to immigrant and refugees. They write amazing blogs. They have plaza programs. They've been doing that for a number of years. And they've got a Denver resource guide for new Americans. The library has also recently put money and institutional capital into training people through the Harwood Institute to turn outward and listen to the community and try to discern what the community needs. And for the future, if you get on a plane tomorrow in Boulder, you can go to the Regenerative Future Summit. And the whole idea there is to create an economy in service to life. Other partners, we've got the Front Range Pioneers. I would like to work with them. And also the Alliance for Sustainable Colorado, which is close to Union Station downtown. And they bring a lot of good speakers on. And lastly, these are future programs I hope to do this year. Some of them are already in the pipeline. Growing Herbs for Health, learning to read trail maps with the Denver Mountain Parks. We're actually going to do that off-site at one of their locations. We have an author coming to speak on our book about the man who thought he owned water. Also, how to put your garden to bed and build your soil. How to conserve energy, maybe consider renewable energies. And then I'd like to do something with cooperative economics, slow money, buying local. Thank you.
I thought the trick was just to move the mouse around. Oh, that's what I did. Oh, cool. Maybe I can come with that. Just ignore the problem. We're good at that, right? Yeah. Okay. So the impact of Laudato Si, or Praise Be to You, from a 13th century poem, has been, to quote a colleague, a Catholic sister who works on sustainability, like drinking from a fire hose. This document, a papal encyclical, was published in 2015. It affirms that climate change is caused by humans. It criticizes the selfishness and obsession with technology that allows this crisis to continue, in particular chastising wealthy nations for benefiting at the expense of the poor. It calls us to act on behalf of our children, but also on behalf of the entire human family. It notes that modern anthropocentrism has its roots, in part, in a flawed Christian theology that promoted mastery and dominion over creation. It emphasizes throughout that everything is connected. That phrase is really important. Everything is connected, that there is mystical meaning to be found in a leaf, in a mountain trail, in a dewdrop, in a poor person's face. It's an extraordinary document, and to those skeptics who will say, the Catholic Church is a bit late to this discussion, yeah, yeah, you're totally right. I'll reply, sure. But an encyclical by the Pope can really get things done at a Catholic institution. So like when the Pope writes it, you get to enlarge text like this and put it on the wall of your library. So let's see, where are we? Oh, clicking forward is, oh. But the mouse isn't working. Okay, there we go. Okay, so libraries should always be part of the conversation. My library, although it's really specialized, it's all about the Virgin Mary, is in fact rich with materials that connect quite powerfully with the current political climate. This is the Holy Family as refugees. And my best example of where we've done it right, or at least we're gesturing toward doing it right, is a recent set of programs around gardening. The Marian Library has an important collection of archival materials around the centuries-old tradition of planting gardens to the Virgin Mary. There's all kinds of unexpected material in this archive, including quite a bit around social justice and food politics, UFW brochures, but the majority of it is plant lists and garden plans, part of a 20th century movement primarily to encourage people to plant devotional gardens at their homes, and then those gardens could be used for a kind of prayerful storytelling. You know, like this plant represents this virtue, this plant helps us tell this story, this plant, the passion flower actually resembles the tools of the crucifixion. I mean, it gets really elaborate. So we built a garden in the library, which was a big production and like wasted a lot of resources actually, but it got a lot of people talking about gardening and plants. So I think what we really did, what was valuable, was provide historical context for the current conversations around sustainability. like in our text and in our tours, we reminded visitors that medieval gardens were full of native plants, right? Planting with natives is not new. In fact, it's the oldest form of gardening. We showed that conversations about our responsibility to creation are not new, and in fact are not even new in the Catholic Church. They're actually grounded in like historical phenomena, including the Church's like really strong concern about the exploitation inherent in the Industrial Revolution, and the works of many Catholics in the 60s and 70s to draw attention to the destructive nature of capitalism and its effects on the global poor. So we're doing our best to work the archive in a way that saves and revives stories and connects them to what's happening now. I think it was great. Mark had that picture of the monk from the Xerox commercial earlier. This is an actual monk. So, like, as part of our storytelling, we partnered with colleagues at the Marianist Environmental Education Center to promote, and they do a lot of work to promote the use of native plants in our gardens and to advocate for the use of plants that will support pollinators. Like this is Brother John at the prairie that he reclaimed. Like they built that highway that you can see in the background, and there was a rubble pile, and they worked for years to like bring it back to the prairie that it would have been before. So like working with them in the context of our program, we created plans for Mary gardens that would replace the kind of now traditional plants like roses and lilies and stuff with like in some cases another species in the same genus, or a plant with a resemblance that was actually a native or would support monarchs or something. Milkweed actually doesn't really have, anyway, but well, milkweed would be a great Marian plant. We could totally make that analogy. Yeah. Anyway, so I will tell you that in the course of this project, we burned through a lot of resources, both financial and physical, and we used a lot of water, and we had to change out plants. So, like, I would totally not be interested in an honest cost-benefit calculation of the work that we've done. But so like that just brings us back to how far do we actually go, right? If we and our devices and our institutions are the problem, how radically do we need to reimagine our roles in society? I would say that's another place where it's actually kind of awesome to be part of a tradition and part of an institution that takes really seriously concepts such as like the apocalypse, creation, salvation, like the possibility of renewal against all odds. And I would also say, just sort of thinking about some of the vocabularies of sort of the post-collapse world or whatever, a symbolic garden might be one of the alternative technologies of storytelling to consider for those dystopian narratives. If things can grow at all, who knows what new languages of flowers might grow from the rubble. So, thanks.
So my name is Amanda Avery. I'm a librarian at Marywood University, which is in Pennsylvania. And I also just wanted to leave you today with a literary-inspired thought experiment. So steampunk. Steampunk, as a literary subgenre of sci-fi, as well as a hobbyist aesthetic movement, is very popular in libraries. As we move deeper into the Anthropocene and towards greater civic and environmental instability, Steampunk's lesser emphasized but no less interesting ideology and ethos, with a focus on subversion, appropriation, repurposing, craftsmanship, can offer a useful metaphorical framework for libraries to find ways to sustain a working technological and resource infrastructure. Steampunk is irreverent and countercultural. It celebrates tinkering and DIY, the quirky, non-linear, non-mainstream. It's about finding novel paths and has an inherent, built-in, sustainable, world-made-by-hand ethos that acknowledges the dignity and elegance aspects of antiquated technologies, revering the uniqueness and craftsmanship of bygone tools, though it has no qualms about dismantling and conjoining them into exquisite hybrids and chimeras that work in new ways with elegance and purpose. It's an ethos that I think intersects with our topic of discussion, sustainability, yes, but perhaps more so resilience, and a celebration of the human ingenuity and creativity, however dark or morally ambiguous it may be at times. It nods to a future with considerably less resources available to produce, power, and maintain the ephemeral technologies, replacing our older and more tangible, knowable, and thus controllable ones, yet perhaps to be replaced with a more practical, human-scale combination we cannot yet imagine. So, what can steampunk teach us? Steampunk is often described as anachronistic, a world that never was combined with a world that will never be. And libraries too, at least in their traditional sense, are sometimes disparaged as being quaint, inefficient institutions from a bygone era, being left in the dust by our digitally connected global future. Steampunk's rejection of linear history, I think, provides a useful philosophy that asks us to conscientiously consider each new technology adoption going forward by rejecting the built-in automatic linear advances in technology in both our work and society, and choosing whether or not to conform to constant upgrades, constant progression towards efficiency, immateriality, digital, the cloud, to conscientiously decide what to keep and what parts to toss onto the parts heap. Steampunk portrays worlds in which high technologies exist and others are conspicuously absent, alternate realities as such. But this is precisely the world in which we are soon to exist, one that unravels slowly, as John Michael Greer puts it, a complex system throwing off bits and pieces of itself as it starts to wobble and spin apart. Industrial civilization's unraveling will probably be more of a whimper than a bang, a slow but insidious falling away of the most complicated, energy-intense, and thus costly and burdensome aspects of complex industrial society going first. So, which ones will be the easiest to maintain? Steampunk offers a fantasy of society not so besieged by the anxiety of our technological fragility, but one that can hammer together a solution from the detritus in a functional and somehow beautiful way, and that's very important. In reality, we may have smartphones, but if they die in a power outage, we can't just wind them up and blow some ether into them. We still do not have the means to repurpose most of our technologies should they fail us. Instead of fighting Comcast, perhaps we should be looking into router hacking and DIY internet. Likely in our future steampunk world, some modern conveniences and devices still exist. We just don't know which ones and in what combination. The punk in steampunk is a nod to rebellion and subversion. It is usually exemplified by a protagonist appropriating, dissembling, and repurposing steam technology for his or her own ambiguous purposes. A rejection of the alienating effects of post-industrial steam technologies on humans and society, while at the same time appropriating and repurposing these same technologies for different ends. So can a steampunk approach to our devices help to minimize the alienating aspects of them? Hacking, modding, and jailbreaking are good starts. How can we incorporate disparate parts to create something new or useful in a different way that it was originally intended? Like the seed libraries in card catalog cabinets and seeds within the online catalog, or tool and object and people libraries are some examples. And finally, can we right the airship by encouraging a balance of information and technology-mediated consumption with a return to production? Making is essential to steampunk. It emphasizes productive labor based on work with materials. So I ask you to consider the actual physical materials, the substance of what constitutes your work, the things you actually work with, touch, manipulate, and the importance of it. Could you do your essential work without them? Are these materials solid or fragile? And consider how they could be incorporated or combined into a more resilient and elegant hybrid analog tech information society. Thank you.
Yes, so we're going to have some questions for the panelists or lightning talk presenters.
I'm very mystified by that amazing website, how it got put together and what your role is.
Well, I made it.
Okay.
It's the NOAA doesn't post. They post some. They've taken those measurements and they've got the data, but they post them in an FTP site in some like aggregated monthly. But I scrape the data off the site, turn it into a CSV file, and then there's some JavaScript that's going on in there that finds the right number and then generates the pitch and makes it a bit skronky. All the code, if you follow the link, all the code's there, and it's not that complicated. And I lifted the JavaScript that makes the sound. I didn't lift it. It was under a GPL license, so I reused it.
Thank you.
That was pretty cool. One other thing to add to it, what is the frequency where we can't hear? I mean, like little kids can hear better than we are, better hearing than us, but I just thought that that's an interesting way of visualizing or turning into audio the tipping point. Yeah. Is it like 44 kilohertz or something like that?
You're thinking of the sampling rate from CDs. I think it would be up in the high thousands.
Oh, okay. Then we'll definitely be. Anyways, it is a really neat project.
Have you had plans for sort of like animating those sounds and putting them together over a time sequence and sending them to a music theorist and have an orchestra made?
That's been done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a string quartet that was composed. That was doing temperature readings in the Antarctic, or maybe CO2.
I just heard that at Amherst College.
Yeah.
I heard them perform it.
Yeah. There have been a number of people have been doing different things with that big scale, small scale. Those are all showing a lot of information in a short period of time. This just shows one thing for a long time.
Yeah, they do it with gene sequences too.
Yeah.
This question is for Wendy. So, tell us, how did you get the idea to do a rap for us today?
Well,
It's
yeah,
awesome.
the time constraint, I just knew that was the only way I could do it, was poetry. I had to do it that way. I had to have the help of the muse. Yeah, I just couldn't imagine. I couldn't bend time without the muse. Because there was I just think it's the funny, since I have the Parkinson's, I'm allowed to make jokes about it. And I think that the idea of a Parkinson's person doing a 5-minute lightning talk is hilarious. And it's also miraculous. And I have to say, it's just the way my life has been going, if I do a little bit of change, I get some help from serendipity. I don't know what it is, and it becomes exponential. So.
It was amazing. Very good.
It will be recorded and on the web.
Yeah.
It is.
Thank you. And I want to thank you for jumping in and helping me. Thank you.
And I just want to add, speaking of the recordings, I want to thank all of the presenters for making your presentations available under a Creative Commons license. And this is going to allow us to share what we've all seen here in person, but on the web and with the community at large for hopefully many years to come.
Yeah, I will say it's sort of an altered state of consciousness in a way, and I didn't want to take the Parkinson's drugs, but they do, I think, alter my consciousness, and I think the kind of change we're trying to do is really, really scary, really, really scary, and to be able to do it, I think, requires just some incredible time and space bending skills. So that sounds really silly because of course I'm a believer in science. I mean, the science march, that was totally wonderful and we needed that. I think we have to do both. I mean, the imagination, where is yes, there you are back there, your approximate locations. The imagining a change to our, we have to imagine that change to our economic system. So we have to do that, but we have to do the really pragmatic scientific work as well. And so, I mean, it's both and, either or. There's so much to do. Thanks.
Oh, Amanda, right? I loved your presentation so much. I guess it's just more of a comment. Like, I totally share your vision. Like, I don't think it's gonna be like, it's gonna be like. I love the idea of the what term did you use? Hybrid, analog, digital, STEAM.
Yeah, that sounds
right?
about right.
Like hacking, DIY internet, like, yeah.
I wanted to thank you for talking about steampunk as well. I was sort of tangentially watched a lot of friends involved with that, especially when SteamCon started in Seattle a number of years ago, and it's very gratifying to see it move away from reimagining Empire, which is what I think a lot of very early steampunk did, is as exciting and as neat as it was, that it was there were a lot of makers there, but a lot of sort of the conceptual reimagining came to, it was all hierarchies and structures and an empire, and you don't necessarily get the latest iteration of BioShock without moving away from that. So I was very grateful for your presentation, and everyone's actually, but thank you.
Yeah, one of the things that really struck me when I was doing research on steampunk that I hadn't realized was how ingrained the notion of subversion was, and people are very conscious of the fact that it's stemming from a Victorian time period, but it's more about appropriating those technologies, you know, and subverting the empire and the imperialism. And it's actually sort of expanded outward too in terms of incorporating other cultures. There's now sort of steampunk-ish iterations in, you know, more Eastern country influenced aesthetics. So yeah.
Hello. Thank you, everyone. I really like how loose these were towards the end of the day. It's kind of really nice as we start to wind down. This is not really a question for Sarah, but just sort of an interest in what you brought up. I remember when Laudato Si came out, and the Pope did a tweet storm. And I was wondering if you had investigated that in terms of some of the issues that we've been talking about, because it was really the first time he'd ever done a tweet storm, and everybody was just completely aghast at what was happening. And so I was just, because one of the things that I'm really thinking about this weekend is pedagogy and sort of thinking about environmental history and environmental communication. And so I was just wondering if you had thought about that, and if you hadn't, then I wanted to just point it out as something that might be a future path for you. And to thank you.
Oh, sure. I'm trying to figure out which part of the question to answer, or which part of the comment to respond to. Yeah, this Pope, he actually, it wasn't, it was under the previous Pope that the @Pontifex Twitter handle was established, but he's the one who's really used it quite a bit, and I suspect he probably has an officer who does a lot of that for him, but I don't know. And there are handles available in multiple languages, so when the tweet comes out, it comes out simultaneously in lots of different languages. So he definitely, that I think contributes to how, for lack of a better word, attractive he is to many people, including kind of lapsed Catholics and non-Catholics, and that he is trying. And there's a lot more to say about him, obviously, but I think the use of social media is part of it, but really it's been the emphasis on mercy as opposed to judgment. That's real. That's actually the base of his appeal. But yeah, social media is really great. I don't know. I mean, it really helps us communicate with people. So the second slide I showed was the president of our university reposting an image on Instagram of the Holy Family as refugees, and gosh, I know how loaded anything Catholic is. Like, there's always a counter argument, but like, there's also some really good work we can do when we like operate from like the vocabularies that we own in a way, and like we have sort of alternate ways of making connections with communities. You know, there's been a lot of discussion about vocabulary, about using what words do we use, what words don't we use, for sure. But it's also just a matter of like, what extra words do we have in a particular situation? And like, one of the nice things about organized religions is that like they have these long traditions of kind of vocabularies and concepts that you can summon in truly powerful ways.
Just following up with Amanda and the stuff about steampunk, I think that was a great way to end, because there's steam and then there's the punk. Punk is about doing it yourself. Punk is about the rejection of authority. It picks up with what Jody was saying and Charlie stuff, and putting those things out there seems sort of punk to me. That approach to the world is one of the ones that would be very helpful in what we're trying to do. As that dead Kennedy said, punk means thinking for yourself.